Hello there, and welcome back to How to Play Shadowrun 5th Edition. This is going to be our second episode. Today we're going to be talking about the main types of characters in the game. Once again, I'm going to be referring to my notes a lot, so I'm going to be looking down. I apologize, but there's just a lot of material to cover. This is such an exciting game. Again, I'm so happy to be bringing you this information, and looking forward to playing it. So, I already covered in the first episode kind of what's going on in the world of Shadowrun in the year 2077, and the things going on in the different parts of the world, and just kind of how we got to where we are. So now we're going to talk about, really getting into the game, what kind of player you can play, what you can do in this world, which is the really good stuff. So, there's three main ways of interacting with the game, main types of characters that you can play. The first way is through magic. Now, magic, we talked about in the first episode, people who are able to use magic are called the Awakened. The magic returned to the world, the ability to use magic was awakened in them, and they found they could manipulate things and had power they weren't aware of before. The Awakened can shape the mana in the world, that's that magic that returned, to their benefit. There's four main different types of magicians, or magical users. There is your magician, which is, they can channel magic into spells and summon spirits and do some other, just kind of a general magician, can do a lot of different things. There's an aspected magician who can really only focus mana in one specific aspect of magic. So they can be either a spellcaster, or an enchanter, or a summoner. Those are the three main types of magic. There's the adept, which is able to channel that magic into improved physical abilities and make themselves more awesome in general. And there's the mystic adept, who split their magic, their mana capabilities between personal improvements and spellcasting ability. The Awakened, they're both feared and sought after by the people of the world. The fear of the unknown leads people to mistrust magic users just because they're not everyday. But the things that you can do as a magician or an adept make you very valuable to a lot of different people. Corps might do a lot to entice an awakened person to join them, and a lot more to keep them there permanently. There are other organizations beside the Corps in the world that would love to have you: mystical societies, organized crime, security firms, law enforcement. Anybody pretty much could benefit by having some magic on their side. There are reasons that you might take any of those jobs, and reasons you might turn all of them aside to become a Shadowrunner. Maybe the money is better, you like the freedom of it, not being tied down. Maybe you have a checkered past, something that you did badly, personal ties to someone or something, a sense of justice, perhaps. There's lots of different reasons that you might become a Shadowrunner. You have to decide what yours is. The major part of being a magician is the astral plane. The astral plane is an emotionally charged photonegative of the physical world. Basically, the only living things and things that are infused with mana show up in the astral plane. That's your connectedness to nature, where magic comes from. Physical objects, even doors and walls, are intangible on the astral plane. They're not noticed. The material plane, the things that are going on in the material plane can be seen and heard on the astral plane, but they're kind of blurred and muted. The emotional context of people and things registers more than physical properties when you're on the astral plane. Living things aren't active on the astral plane, but they cast a reflection of themselves there, an aura. So basically, looking at the astral plane, you can see the aura of all the living things and the magical things in the world reflected there. They show up with an aura. That's when something is inactive on the astral plane. When something is active on the astral plane, they actually have a tangible astral form that's brighter and more colorful than the auras that you can see, and it can be interacted with. Astral perception is the ability that magicians and adepts have that allow them to see auras and the astral plane overlaid upon the material plane. So when you look at the room around you, you're also, if you're using your astral perception ability, you can also sense the magical aura of things, their emotions, their emotionally charged kind of auras, and magical powers. While you're astrally perceiving, you are dual-natured. You have a presence in both the physical and the astral plane simultaneously. So you can interact with and even fight with astral objects. spirits, other magicians, enchanted magical objects, that kind of thing. Astrally perceiving makes tasks more difficult in the physical world, though you get penalties to your actions, basically, while you're perceiving in the astral plane and trying to do things physically. It's just a little more difficult. You have to concentrate more, basically. Not all adepts can astrally perceive. They have to take an ability. They have to use some of their magic to use the astral perception power. So you decide that in character creation. There's also astral projection. In astral projection, a magician can place his consciousness into an astral form and leave his physical body. So this allows you to travel around the astral plane at great speeds, unimpeded by material objects like walls, objects, and people, unless those people are dual-natured. So your physical body is basically in a trance while this is going on. So your mind is out in astral space. You're still connected to your physical body, and any damage taken by either your physical body or your astral projection will be felt by the other. So basically, you're still connected in an essence. So while you are projecting, you are still perceiving auras of living things that are not active in the astral plane. Like you're floating around in the astral plane, you can see the auras of the humans, the magical items. They cast an aura into the astral plane, but they're not active in that plane. So the auras don't give you enough of a link between the astral plane and the physical world to do damage to them. Basically, when you're in the astral plane, you can only damage astral objects. Astral forms move at near the speed of thought. So seconds to reach nearby locations, minutes anywhere on the same continent, and hours to get anywhere on the globe. But you are moving too fast to kind of see the environment around you. Everything shows up as sort of a blur until you get to where you're going. The second major way that you interact with the game is through the Matrix. The Matrix is the digital world within a world made of fiber optic cable, networks, data, and computing power. When you physically jack into the Matrix, you plunge into a virtual environment of a consensual hallucination. The Matrix is the future of our internet. Everyone uses it, and almost all objects really are connected to the Matrix. So you can jack into virtual reality, or VR, if you want the full immersion. That's not how most kind of everyday people use the Matrix all the time. Virtual reality is great for visiting hosts and consuming entertainment, but for most simple usage, people use augmented reality. And augmented reality, or AR, you use through your comm link or some other device, usually the comm link. The augmented reality interprets the Matrix data for the area around you and overlays that information on what you see. Basically, if you're looking at a screen, you would see yourself and the world around you, and you would see information about the locations, what movies are playing at that theater, the menu at that restaurant, that kind of thing, for all the places around you. More often, the augmented reality is sent through your mind if you have cyber eyes, or if you're wearing special glasses or sunglasses, or there's a lot of different variations for some way that you can see augmented reality, just information overlaid on the world around you. Comlink is the device most people use to interact with the Matrix. Your Comlink is basically, it's a small device similar to our phones that encompasses and replaces all the different digital devices that you might carry now. Your computer, phone, your Game Boy. It's also your personal identification and your wallet, your method of pay for things. Your comlink is usually small enough to fit in a pocket, on a wrist, glasses. There's a lot of different kind of variations of comlink. While everyone uses the Matrix, there are, of course, those few who feel the want or the need to break the rules of the Matrix. These people are called hackers. So there are two primary types of hackers, deckers and technomancers. So deckers are characters who use a cyber deck, or just a deck, to perform illegal actions in the Matrix. A cyber deck is a slightly larger, more complex, and illegal version of a comlink. They vary in size and kind of composition, but roughly they have about the volume the size of a small book or a tablet. deck houses the programs and the protocols that a hacker needs to hack the Matrix, the attack and sleaze actions that you don't get on comlinks that are illegal. But it's the lifeblood of a decker. That's how they do their stuff. Technomancers have the downright weird ability to use the Matrix in both augmented reality and virtual reality without any equipment at all. No gear. They're not technically magical, but their abilities and the source of their power is a complete mystery even to them. Though they're very rare technomancers and very distrusted, up to the point of paranoia. Not all technomancers are hackers. A lot of them aren't. They don't illegally manipulate the Matrix, but in the eyes of the public, they are. They can do things that nobody would think to be possible in the Matrix, and this causes just a lot of worry when almost everything in the world is connected to the Matrix. Many governments require technomancers to register, even if they have very limited power. Because of the stigma and the fear surrounding technomancy, the paranoia about it, most technomancers keep their abilities a secret, and their identities as well. They'll use dummy comm links or pretend to be deckers to avoid the stigma of technomancer. Though they're very rare, their abilities are stunning. They're able to do what other people consider impossible in the Matrix. They can bend it to their will, and they can summon digital servants to do their bidding to help them out. Though technomancers and deckers interact with the Matrix in different ways, they have some different abilities. There's similarities, but just the way that they do what they do is different. Technomancers tap into what they call the resonance. It's very kind of mysterious, like I said. Even to technomancers, they don't fully understand it, but it's just an ability. They're so comfortable with this data that's flowing around constantly, they just see it and they can tap into it and they can do things to affect it. While I'm talking about the Matrix, I should really talk about virtual reality too. To access virtual reality, you need a DNI, or a direct neural interface. This is a technology that allows your brain to communicate directly with a comlink or a cyberdeck, something that gets you into the Matrix. So you can fully step into as virtual as a simulated world of all the information, the devices that are on the Matrix. Everything that's on the Matrix you can see in virtual reality and taste and hear and touch. It makes the Matrix world very real. Although it doesn't look much like the world that we're used to. It's a sculpted world. So you need a direct neural interface to get into VR. You also need a SimSense module. That's something that's a part of all cyberdecks. It should be available where you jack into the Matrix. Basically, that's just all interpreting the senses around you. There is a difference between, it's called a cold sim, which is your standard SimSense. It's a bit of a mental buffer between the things that are going on in the Matrix and you in the real world. There's also hot sim. When you go into the Matrix hot sim, you're basically taking that layer of protection away, so that any damage you take in the Matrix kind of directly affects you as physical damage. It impacts your mind directly. The hot sim is even better than real life, though it is addictive. So it allows you to manipulate things better in the Matrix. It definitely gives you a closer, more real feel with the world, faster, but it has its drawbacks too, and it's more dangerous to you physically and addictive. A lot of hacking is done in virtual reality, in fact most of it, because it's just easier when you're directly plugged in to manipulate things in the Matrix kind of face to face. It's faster, more accurate, and it's easier to keep an eye on the heat that's coming down on you, because believe me, there's a lot of heat. The Grid Overwatch Division, God, is watching over you. So they're the division of the government that's in charge with keeping the law in the Matrix. And every illegal action that you take draws their attention more. They're actively seeking illegal activity in the Matrix. They will find you if you don't get done and get out in time. Also, private security, like spiders, programs, and intrusion countermeasures. They're abbreviated IC and pronounced ICE. So there's a lot of different types of ICE. There are countermeasures that are, trying to keep you out of places, or if you're trying to get in, and other programs that are employed by the hosts and the locations within the Matrix to keep you from doing stuff you shouldn't. VR, virtual reality, is an interactive manifestation of the Matrix. When you enter VR, you find yourself on a dark, flat plane. And in every direction around you are shining lights from millions of icons. These are every device, file, and person that are connected to the Matrix are represented. Though because of the insane number of devices and items that are connected to the Matrix, your connection device, your deck, or your comm link is running filtration programs so you don't get overwhelmed with all of that. So you don't see, your neighbor Bob's hydro dishwasher. It just kind of eliminates some of the inane things unless you really want to look for them. But you see all these devices stretched out in all directions, starting with the items that are closest to your meat body, your physical body. It's assumed that you might want to interact with those things first. Further out, the lights get dimmer as the devices get further away from your personal body, and they get kind of flickery, sort of like stars in the distance because of the distance that data is traveling to reach your persona. So that's what you see all around you. Now, if you look up further into the sky above the plane of the world are hosts. Hosts are places within the Matrix. They're sort of like websites on our internet. They're independently owned and maintained. They're places that you can go to do things, to meet people, to find information. Like I said, similar to like a website on our internet. The hosts float in space at different heights depending on kind of their importance and their sort of standing within the corporate world. So the Matrix location for the local Greasy Burger would be kind of just above ground level, just sort of floating there. But the host for the Seattle Public Core or something like that would be kind of mid-level in the sky, and at the very top are the largest, the most important hosts of the megacorps. And the size of the hosts, they're different again, sort of depending on the importance, and they can look like basically anything. So the corpse can make the host look like what they want to. So there's a wide variety of things that you see in the sky. From the smallest host just being like a building up to about the size of Manhattan. That's kind of where they capped the size of hosts just to keep the sky from getting overwhelmed by so much stuff. But once you go to a host, if you enter it, the inside of the host can be bigger than the outside, as it's a self-owned little space within the Matrix. And when you're inside the hosts kind of they have their own rules or protocols for the Matrix. They don't necessarily have to conform to the rules for the general viewership of the Matrix, if you might call it that. Kind of the base programming language that everyone experiences the Matrix in. When you go into a host, it's a more personalized experience, a more differentiated. You want to, gotta keep people coming to your host, right? You gotta keep them coming back to your site. You see the host in the sky and the lights all around you, and if you look down at yourself, you see your persona. Every person that's jacked into the Matrix has their own, basically personal icon, which you can make to look like, there's a lot of options you can make for a persona. It does have to look like an object with life, basically. An animal or a human, metahuman, something like that. Generally, it is limited in the range between like a dwarf-sized object and a troll-sized object. So you can't have a persona the size of a skyscraper or just a speck of dust, something like that. It has to be kind of roughly metahuman shaped or sized. And most people, they keep it pretty normal. They look mostly like their real selves. Maybe, change the hair a little bit, get a cyber tattoo, stuff like that, kind of dress it up. And you decide that for yourself, what your persona icon looks like, and you can change it up too within the game, at least as far as I can tell. So besides personas, the people that are in the Matrix that you can see and yourself, the objects that you see around you are icons for devices that are connected to the Matrix. Like, pretty much anything. Like I said, your filtration software will eliminate some of the inane ones, but anything kind of important or bigger, or that you might be able to interact with, you'll see the icons of. And especially dangerous objects will be highlighted. If you're carrying a wireless-enabled gun on your person in VR, that will show up, separated from your persona icon, so that people you're interacting with can identify, oh, it's a dangerous item he's got. In general, in the Matrix, you can change things up quite a bit. Things can look a bit different, but the general rule that everyone has to follow is that form suggests function. Basically, you can tell by looking at something roughly what it's intended to do. So there's an icon for a file. It's usually a fair bit smaller than a persona icon, be more like the size a palm size or something. But just a generic, if nobody edited anything or changed it at all, the icon for a file, just a general file, and music, movies, documents, that kind of thing, just a box. There's any kind of geometric shaped box that you can open and look in. Not too many people leave it as that base, simple texture. People are a little bit more inventive than that. But the function, you can kind of roughly tell from looking at it. So a document might look like a scroll or a book. A movie might look like, an old school film reel or a video set or something like that. A TV set. So icons in the Matrix follow that rule just to make it simpler for people in the Matrix. Nobody wants to be baffled by, this. It's there to be interacted with. You don't want it to be too confusing, things like that. So the laws are enforced to keep things generally making sense. Though within a host, things might be different because not necessarily all those laws have to be followed, kind of like I mentioned. But we're getting into the nitty-gritty here. So another important part of functioning in the Matrix is understanding marks. So a mark is another abbreviation for your Matrix Authentication Recognition Key. That's a mark. Now a mark is it's unique to you. Everybody has their own mark. There's a small emblem, and when a mark is placed, you'll be able to see it, but other people won't in general, unless they're searching for your mark or for a mark that maybe shouldn't be there, something like that. In general, they're not noticed by other people, but it is specific to you, and it should kind of have something to do with what you look like or your personality, something like that. Can't think of a good example right now, but it should be suggestive of something. A mark is how the Matrix recognizes users and regulates access to items within the Matrix. So if John's file over there doesn't have my mark on it, I can't access it. So that's his personal file. Marks are how the Matrix recognizes users and regulates access to files or hosts and things like that. For example, you want to visit a host. You want to go somewhere, there's a particular host you want to visit, there's a cool party going down, something. You want to go to this host. To get into a host, you have to mark it. You put your mark on the host, and it allows you access, basically. So this particular host you want to go to isn't public, though. They don't just let anybody mark it. No, not just anybody can get in. You need an invitation. So there's different ways to get an invitation to mark a host. So for this particular host, you get permission, you get an invite to mark by paying the cover charge. So, you go to the door, you pay the cover charge, and you get an invitation to mark the host. You put your mark, you slap your mark on it, virtually, and the Matrix allows you access to the host. You can go in. So if you're a hacker and you don't want to pay the cover charge, you have some options to get your mark on there. But you need to be aware, there's consequences to doing illegal actions in the Matrix. Basically, once you do something illegal, the hounds start sniffing for you. So they will eventually find you. Basically, you just gotta kind of pay attention to what you're doing, get in, get what you need, and get out of the Matrix before they find you. The more marks that you personally put on an object, a file, a vehicle, anything that's connected to the Matrix, the more marks you put on it gives you more control, more access to that item, up to 3 marks. For if you're the owner of an item, it basically functions as if you have 4 marks on it. There's a special relationship between an owner and an item that's connected to the Matrix, besides just a user or an accessor. There's a ton more that can be said about the Matrix. There's a huge chapter about it in the book, a lot of really cool stuff. But that gives you a basic overview, what virtual reality is like, what the characters are that interact with the Matrix, and you can do some really cool and fun stuff in the Matrix. So, Another character that uses the Matrix a lot, but they're not classified as a hacker, is a rigger. Now, a rigger uses a control rig to insert herself or himself into a vehicle through the Matrix. When you're in the vehicle, you're operating in virtual reality, basically, but you enter this vehicle, this object, and control it as if it was your own body. So you drive the car, your brain is controlling all the movements. It gives you hyper control, just incredible speed of access and getting things done. And if you have the right gear, you have a control console, you can control multiple objects at the same time. You can't be physically in more than one object controlling it with your body, but you can send orders and control multiple objects at the same time, like drones, vehicles, things like that. So that gives you a lot of options. You can do a lot of damage in the meat world as a rigger by controlling, a bunch of drones, a crazy tricked out vehicle operates basically like a tank, and you're in complete control of it. So that's very cool. Often riggers are enemies with deckers. They're kind of opposed to each other, so they both use the Matrix to do what they do. The riggers aren't doing anything illegal in the Matrix, or they might not be. But in general, the riggers aren't doing illegal things in the Matrix, but the hackers are kind of best placed to take a rigger down by doing Matrix damage to their devices. They can kind of see what the rigger's doing and make them less effective, basically. So riggers and deckers a lot of times are kind of not the biggest fans of each other. You have to have a control rig augmentation. It's an augmentation you can get for your body that basically just puts a control device in your head so that you can jack into vehicles that also have a control rig set up on them. So not all vehicles have it, for sure. It's kind of a special thing, but you can put it in pretty much any vehicle or a device or object that you want to control like that. And the rigger is kind of a bridge between the Matrix and the meat world. They operate in the Matrix, but they really do their best work, their damage, in the physical world. And the physical world is our last major realm of the game. The physical world is where the vast majority of meta-humanity resides, where they spend their lives. So only a small portion of the world can use magic or talk to machines with just their mind, or prefer to spend their time in cyberspace, in the Matrix. Of course, among Shadowrunners, the extraordinary is much more commonplace. So you get a more mix of those kind of out-of-place characters. To those who aren't inclined to the types of characters we've talked about so far, there's a lot of really great things you can do in the physical world. The wide and wonderful world of augmentations. The really cyberpunk elements of the game come in mostly through the augmentations. In the year 2077, personal augmentations are quite common. Though just like with gear, the better it is, the harder it is to get, and the more you're going to have to pay for it. Cyberware is the more common personal augmentation. Basically, it's the fusion of man and machine, using some kind of machine and computer elements in yourself to make you, better than you were before. You can get improved senses, faster motion, more strength, a lot of different things you can get. This superiority costs more than just Nuyen. Getting augmentations takes away a part of your essence. The connection that you have to the natural world. And that connection is the source of power for magic users and for technomancers. So it's very rare to see those kind of characters with a lot of augmentations, as it directly reduces the impact that they can have in the magical world and in what they do in the Matrix. So also, the less meta-humanity that you have in you, the more others notice. You slip into the uncanny valley where there's just something not quite right about you. And it just puts other people off a little bit. Even though they might not be able to put a pin on it, something about you isn't quite right. So it makes them a little bit more uncomfortable. The other option for personal augmentations is BioWare. Now, BioWare improves meta-humanity by using flesh, muscle, and organic materials to make improvements. Because it is biological, it's not machine basically. It doesn't destroy as much humanity as cyberware does, as much essence. So this type of enhancement is more rare and more expensive because that it doesn't take so much essence, and it's just more difficult to create. Later in the game, characters might find an avenue, a way to get an even better form of BioWare called cultured BioWare. Basically, this takes cells from the character and makes BioWare specifically from those cells, augmentations that takes up, it reduces your essence even less because it's from your body originally. Though this is, it's really great stuff. It's heinously expensive. That's something that is hard to find. So through the course of the game, you might make a contact, or you might find some way that you can get this stuff, but it's not going to be available right off. So speaking of that, there's a couple of different levels of cyberware and BioWare that basically as you go up in level, it gets more expensive and it takes less essence, and it's harder to get a hold of. It's more controlled. You have your different levels basically starts at used cyberware or BioWare, and have standard new BioWare, alphaware, BioWare, and deltaware. So, like I said, each grade as you go up, it gets more expensive, harder to find, and less costly in the way of essence. You can get used standard and alphaware, cyberware, or BioWare as a starting character, basically in character creation. But beyond that, you have to get further into the game and get some more work under your belt before you can get the heavy duty stuff. There are a ton of awesome things that you can do with your character in Shadowrun. There's so many options, and it's amazing. Your limits really are just your imagination, your vision for the kind of character that you want to play, and how deep your pockets are. We'll get more into that on the next episode when we talk more in depth about character creation, deciding priorities, and we'll get into that on the next episode. But there's an insane amount of customization in this game, which is what makes it it's a lot of work to get through the book and a lot of stuff to remember, but it's going to be really awesome when you get it all together. It's worth the work, I think, although I haven't got to play yet. So that's been it for the second episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Sorry for the long wait in getting it together. I'm a really slow reader, but hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a good day, and we'll see you later.